Hello? Oh, sorry. Too loud. Hi. As you said, my name is Mikhail Luzyanin. It's also described here. I'm a graphics specialist in Soft company. I have more than 6 years experience in making 3D applications for WebGL and in total more than 20 years of making different models for different industries. And today I want to share with you some of my thoughts how to prepare and optimize 3D application for the Verge3Day engine. To speak louder, okay. In my opinion, project consists not only from making 3D model and optimizing it, but mostly from avoiding of unnecessary things and mistakes. And today I will talk mostly about experiences and most approved techniques and methods in making 3D applications. I will go mostly briefly and we'll talk mostly briefly about them because of short time. So I will not deep in some details. I hope you forgive me for that. Here you can see some optimization goals. I will talk mostly about 4 of them because last one is one big topic to speak about. And here you can see a geometry. It's a root of any 3D application. And it's very important to get good mesh to get the good result for a 3D application. And before you start modeling, it's better to decide what level of detail you want to achieve from your 3D application. And keep it all the time you are modeling. To get the good reflection, it's better to make your model as much regular as possible for you. Yeah, I know this is a very simple thing, but most of people are from time to time avoiding this. From time to time, of course, you need to increase the amount of polygons, especially when the surface turns on a high angle. To get a best result in optimization, meaning what better to use smooth groups, or in another way to say split between surfaces, to get a smooth result instead of extremely increasing amount of polygons on your object. When you making a cylindrical object, it usually increasing amount of polygon to the center of it. So better to decrease amount of polygon in its center by hands to get the most optimized result and to keep the level of detail for this object the same. Of course, try to not overload with extra detail your object that user can't see. On the left side, you can see that a border of this object already set a level of detail for this object. And this detailed part is really over detailed. Even if you zoom closer to it, you will see a better result on its sides for the reflection, for the specular. So the solution is to increase amount of polygon for the border or decrease amount of polygon for the detailed part. And of course, the most common way to reduce amount of polygons for the mesh is to bake a normal map from high poly to low poly. But for these techniques, mostly used in game development. But in for WebGL, it usually gives not a good result because of some limitations. And usually, if you closer to your object, if you zoom closer to your object, you can see different artifacts. This is because of an limitation of an 8-bit image. So there is several solutions. First is to use 16-bit image, but it will increase the weight of your image extremely, so it's not an optimization at all. The second one is to use smooth groups with normal maps when you bake from high poly to low poly. This method usually used by game developers, but it's normal when you moving by the through the level where a lot of different objects with not so detailed parts. You shoot around, and you don't care that if you're close to some of the objects, you can see different artifacts. But it's very important when you can zoom closer to the product that you shows for your customer. And this method is not good for, in our opinion, for our purposes. And the last one is to add some noise, and this method fits only the surfaces with the big roughness. So what to do? We made a lot of different tests on different 3D applications last 6 years, and came, in our opinion, with the best solution for this is to use a middle poly mesh with a smooth groups for high glossy object without baking normal map from high poly to low poly. This seems to be simple, but many people still using baking from high poly to low poly and different things. So it's our recommendation. So where to use normal map? You can use normal map in multi-surface material when you need to create a lot of small islands with a lot of different surfaces in one material. So it's usual way to do such things. On a very high roughness surfaces, for example, like this armchair, and on far from sight object when the user can't zoom enough to see these artifacts. Let's talk about textures. Here you can see commonly used maps for PBR pipeline and not only. As you can see, most of them are black and white, and the first thing you can do is to combine them into one colored RGBA texture. You can combine up to 4 images. If you have got only one black and white map, you can combine it with another already existing colored image by putting it into its alpha channel. And the last one situation is when you haven't any already existing colored map. The best you can do is to convert your map to JPEG format with 95% of compressing and to grayscale mode. It will be the best. Another way to reduce amount of images that usually avoided by many modelers is to use vertex color instead of image. But you will need to add additional edges to the mesh to create borders for different color. You can use vertex colors not only for coloring, but also as roughness, metallic, and specular maps, and any other solid map. Here you can see an example of such material where only vertex color was used to create this nightstand. Another way to optimize your images, your maps, is to optimize UV space. As much compact your UV map will be, then more effectively it will use a space of an image. So you even can reduce the size of an image without losing a quality. And let's talk about optimizing amount of shaders on your 3D scene. Instead of creating multiple amount of materials and shaders, you can reuse one shader multiple times by changing its textures using special load texture puzzle. Here you can see an example of such optimization. All these tires was created from one shader, from one material, by changing only its textures on the fly. And another way to optimize shader, usually when you create a 3D scene, you can make a lot of different objects with the same material. And when you exported it to the Verge3Day engine, you will get also a multiple amount of shaders. So better, before you exported it to the Verge3Day engine, combine this object into one solid object, so you will get only one shader on export. Of course, if you need to add some animations for this, you can use armature instead of object animation. This will allow you to keep the object solid and and allow you to better control the animation. Another way to reduce amount of shaders in your 3D scene is to combine simple shaders into one complex, especially if you plan to allow the user to change between these shaders on this object. To change between them, you can use Mix Shader in Blender or Blend Material in 3ds Max. So instead of two shaders, you will get only one. And it will more faster to change between these two materials. Another big deal for optimization is to use only HDRI image to lighten your 3D scene, so without any point light. Some of these images can weight less than 1 megabyte. And if your object in this 3D scene is static, you can bake different maps on the plane and directly on this object, like shadow map, ambient occlusion map, irradiance map, and any other map you can bake and you need on this 3D scene. And what about dynamic shadow? So it's better to use a dynamic shadow only if it really helps you to show the product from a good side. For example, on this left picture, you can see the industrial robot demo with the robot with a dynamic shadow, and it helps to highlight the shape of the object, I think, on my opinion. And you can turn and rotate this robot around its axis to see any side of the robot without a shadow. So you can see all details without any problems if you want. And on the right you can see the scooter demo with a shadow. You can't rotate around its axis the scooter, and most of the details are hidden by this shadow in the scooter. So for this 3D scene, it's better to avoid this dynamic shadow. It not helps but interfere. So the solution is to use dynamic shadows, dynamic ambient occlusion, different post-processing effects, only if it really helps you to show the product, not just clicking and enabling it everywhere just because it exists. So the conclusions: make regular mesh without over detail that user can see. Bake all you can bake. It will extremely increase the optimization. It will extremely increase the rendering of your application, especially baking shadows, ambient occlusion, irradiance map, and so and any other map map. Use middle poly for a glossy object. It will get the best result in our opinion. Combine textures and reuse them multiple times. For example, if you have a noise pattern, you can use it in multiple materials multiple times by coloring it in different colors. And use simple values or vertex color instead of images. This will save a lot of texture space and save a lot of time for loading of the application. Combine meshes by materials and use point light and dynamic shadow and any other post-processing choicely, so if it really helps you to show the product from a good side. That's all. It was quick, but any questions? Okay, from the first.
Good presentation. This is the first time I've heard that if I have many objects that have the same material, that I end up with multiple shaders. So thank you for telling me that. How much the penalty is there?
You will, for example, if you have 10 objects with the same material, you will have 10 shaders, different shaders. It will render at the same time 10 times. If it's a really complex shader, it will extremely slow your rendering. I made such optimization for your. Okay, next one. Decimate from time to time gives not a good result. So better to use polygons for good shading of the object. But decimate gives very triangulated objects. Triangulated objects not good for shading, especially if you leave it as a mesh without baking from high poly to low poly. If you bake from high poly to low poly, decimate is good enough. But if you will leave this object without any baking, for example, on the scooter, if I would leave this triangulated, you will see not a good result, in fact. Better to use quads for a high glossy object. Yes. Yes. Okay. Yes, you can combine simple shaders. For example, you have a simple glossy shader for chrome material and, for example, a material for plastic. You can just connect them to mix shader and use special puzzle set value, changing this value in mix shader using this puzzle, and very quickly switch between these two materials. Is the best, then you will have two material. You will economy in shaders, you will economy in speed of changing between them. Okay, yes? You mean by colors? By channel? You can use Blender Composer for this. When you there's separate and combine RGBA node. You can put on the desk all these four black and white texture. Each of them connect to the layer, to separate layer, combine, render, and you will get the combined result. Or you can use GIMP, as I prefer. GIMP. You also can find separate and combine in GIMP special. Okay.
Thank you. It's a sort of reminder, like, oh, that all really makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks for that. What about modifiers? State zero.
What are you asking?
Like blender modifiers.
Okay.
State zero. Don't use them at all, or just slide in.
Oh, I use a lot of modifiers when I'm modeling, when I'm preparing some model, but before I export, I prefer to bake them, to apply them before exporting, because it will give you a stable result.
Yeah, it will. But it's already like golden rule. You don't want the mesh to get all mashed up.
Mm-hmm.
So it's inverse polygon.
Mm-hmm.
So when you do something, about
No, if you're modeling something, for example, you have a subdivision modifier, you apply it, and
like 4 and you go like, oh, that's awesome, but in real life maybe 2 is better.
you mean that you will get after.
Like a subdivision service,
Mm-hmm.
or when you set it on 4, it's awesome, but it really messes up the mesh because if there's too many polygons in the table.
Mm-hmm.
Is there some point when you say, okay, is there with distance?
Sorry, I can't get what you're trying to ask.
We'll talk about it after.
Okay, let's talk about, yes. Maybe I need some more explanation. Okay. Mm-hmm. You need to mix them. Mix shader, or can use or blend material, and you are 3D Max or a Blender user, so Max. You can use a special float value node to connect to blend mix input. Mm-hmm. You can create two physics material, blend them. Mm-hmm. You asking how to separate them and connect to different. You can use yes, I can understand. You can use color correction where when you connect it to the texture, and set to R, G, B, and A channel to be, for example, to use only R channel, and then the output will be only R channel. No, it's directly in the 3ds Max node system. Okay.
Last one here. You mentioned dynamic ambient
Occlusion, yes.
What is that?
You can enable dynamic ambient occlusion using puzzles. So it will be dynamically renewed if you move some object. But it's very slow. It's not because of that we are too lazy in Verge3Day to implement very fast ambient dynamic and ambient occlusion, because it still use a ray tracing method to create such thing, and this thing is too slow for the WebGL. It's screen space, but it's still slow. Okay. Level of detail. No, we don't have such things, only in programming. Any plans to implement? Alexander, have we plan to implement this? Okay, I think we'll discuss this and think, can we implement this easily? I know that they removed this from Blender, as I can remember. Maybe they return it. Can you say no? Yes, I know it's common practicing. maybe we'll think about, maybe if it's implemented in Blender, we will use this thing, maybe we'll create something from puzzles. Of course, show height is, you can use this manually, and you create even procedural to create such thing. It's a little bit complex and overload the number of puzzles in your scene. Now we mostly concentrate on creating different features to show the not so big scenes. Mostly it's local with showing one, two, or several products. We made such optimization, I think you know, in Blend for Web, because we usually think that our engine will used by the game developers, but this didn't happen. So this was our mistake during a lot of time. Any question? Okay. Thank you very much for questions.